Easily the most talked about team this past NFL offseason had to be the Philadelphia Eagles. And the mad scientist at the helm, Chip Kelly, and his newfound general manager powers. And how he was going to sit there and he already changed some of the ways of the NFL. Now he's going to do the same thing in the front office. And oh my God, the Eagles are assembling yet another dream team. And they are going to go to Super Bowl 50 and win the whole motherfucking shebang. It's like you gave this middle-aged dude that lives his life in his mom's basement Madden powers, and he decided to run his shit like he's in dynasty mode on Madden, and he didn't even run it well. I mean, what the fuck did you think was going to happen with all of this? I was on it from the very beginning, how stupid this was. I knocked so many of the moves, because to me it was clear as day to see this is fucking stupid. This is not how you conduct yourself. This is not how you try to build a championship team. So, of course, you had some knuckleheads that weren't smart enough to see this. You had others that, to be fair, were just Eagles fans that wanted this to be right because they didn't want to accept the other possibility of what was going to end up being the reality, is that Chip Kelly became the GM and that Chip Kelly, the general manager, severely hurt and undermined Chip Kelly, the head coach. And then the combination of coach and general manager Chip Kelly lost at the same time both the locker room and the front office, and coach and general manager Chip Kelly were sent packing. A 7-9 season. They did finish second in the NFC East, but what the fuck does that mean? And a team now sitting with the number 13 overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. I hate to say I told you so. No, I fucking don't. I told you so. This overrated fucking operation. What a fucking joke and a half. I mean, this was a disaster season for the Philadelphia Eagles. A guy with 2 10-win seasons, you decide to give him personnel control. You give him the say-so. You make him the general manager. You're letting him run the ship. Why in the fuck would you ever do that? And the Eagles organization wonders why they've never won a Super Bowl. Never. And you have a period of time of 20-plus years between actual Super Bowl appearances that they lost both of them. There's a reason this dumb dick organization's never won a Super Bowl championship, and it's because of bullshit like this. 2 years at the helm, 2 10-win seasons, 1 playoff appearance, 1 playoff loss, 0 playoff victories, and you're giving the guy the power to run the entire shebang-a-bang of the 53-man roster. And the draft and free agency and, oh my fucking God. Are we surprised that this was a disaster? You shouldn't be. I mean, what even went well this year? Well, to be fair to them, they beat the New England Patriots. They beat the New York Jets. So they beat a team in the Patriots that is playing in the AFC Championship game, at least, and who knows if they advance from there or not. And a Jets team with 10 wins that, should have, for all intents and purposes, maybe made the playoffs. Fletcher Cox was a beast because Fletcher Cox is Fletcher Cox, and he did what Fletcher Cox does. But perhaps the single biggest thing that went well for this Eagles organization in 2015 is that Chip Kelly became the general manager to undermine Chip Kelly, the head coach, and both of them have now been fucking sent packing. If there's one positive out of all of this season, is that the Eagles have a top 15 pick and Chip Kelly's gone. I mean, that's just the way it is. As most everything else involving this organization from this offseason and the way the 2015 season played out was pretty much a fucking disaster. And you say, yeah, I'm being harsh. But, you're talking about a team with 2 straight 10-win seasons that did all these moves and they won 3 fewer games than the previous 2 years. I mean, they were clearly headed in a downward trajectory. And at times it got to the point where you could clearly tell that the players had quit on the organization and, more importantly, quit on the head coach and general manager. And I can't blame them. This guy's a fucking clown and in way over his head. I mean, this dumb dick thought that Sam Bradford was going to be the answer. He traded a younger, more athletic, in my opinion, much cheaper Nick Foles, who seemed to be at least an adequate fit for his system, for an older, more injury-prone, and way more expensive Sam Bradford. Yes, it didn't go well with Nick Foles in St. Louis, I grant you that. But it sure as hell didn't go very well with Sam Bradford in Philadelphia either, especially at the early point in the season. And just because he had a few games where he put up some good fantasy numbers doesn't mean he was a good quarterback this year. I mean, who in their fucking right mind thinks that they're going to build a championship contending team around Sam Bradford? And what makes it so bad is not only did they just give up Foles, which I'm not saying alone that was really worth that much, but they hurt their position in the draft in both 2015 and 2016. For Christ's sakes, the Eagles don't have their second-round pick in 2016. Why? For Sam fucking Bradford? Who does that? And then Chip Kelly just couldn't wait to trade LaShawn McCoy. So he trades him to Buffalo for Kiko Alonso, a guy with multiple torn ACLs. I believe he had one torn ACL in each of his knees, so at least he balanced the shit out. Just to, he comes to Philadelphia. He's younger and cheaper, and he fits better under the salary cap. Just so that way he could hurt his knee and miss a good portion of the season, too. Imagine that. Just so that way you could turn around and invest even more money than you would have invested in LaShawn McCoy at the running back position to bring in DeMarco Murray and pay him big money. And then you gave some money to Ryan Matthews, too, a guy who actually fit the system you were trying to run. But at no point in time did the Philadelphia Eagles actually try to bring in this straight-ahead downhill power runner in DeMarco Murray and try to make the system work around him and work with him. They tried to plug him into the crap that they run, and it didn't work. So you paid more money for an even more ineffective running back in your system because you're a fucking moron. But then you allow Jeremy Maclin to leave in free agency because you don't need him. And then he goes down to Kansas City and has a pretty solid year. Then they decide that they're going to shore up their freaking secondary in free agency. So this knucklehead decides he's going to take a number 2 mediocre corner in Byron Maxwell and pay him big-time number 1 corner money. And I wonder how the fuck that trade worked out. Like, I look at it from a fantasy football standpoint. This tells you how stupid and ridiculous this fucking idiot was and how ridiculous some of these moves were. When I go into fantasy football, one of the things I'll look at is I'll look at a wide receiver's matchup against an opposing secondary. And a lot of times I like the matchup of a number 2 wide receiver against a number 2 corner or a slot corner or a number 1 receiver, but he plays on the left side of the field, meaning that if this corner over here at the left corner position doesn't shadow him, he gets a lot of opportunities against the number 2 or number 3 corner. So every week I would sit there pretty much in fantasy football, and I'm like, whoever Byron Maxwell's matched up against, I want to put him in my DraftKings and FanDuel lineups. I mean, fucking you paid number 1 corner money to Byron Maxwell, who was mediocre in Seattle. Idiot. They lost twice to Washington. I mean, you had a chance to still win this division. As much of a clusterfuck as this situation was and as bad and in over his head as Chip Kelly was as a general manager, which ultimately affected the head coach Chip Kelly, you found a way to lose to Washington twice. You win one of those games against Washington, maybe you still have a chance to win that division. You had big losses in a short time span with Tampa Bay, and then the Thanksgiving game against Detroit, don't forget. I mean, you got steamrolled in those games. Tampa Bay and Detroit steamrolled them, for Christ's sakes. You win those 2 games, and you're in the playoffs, potentially. You win one of those games, and you beat Washington once, you win the fucking division. Unbelievable. But then defensively, 32nd in the league in rushing yards allowed, 28th in the league in total points allowed. So, of course, you're trying to run this high-octane offense, and you don't have the proper personnel in place. You've gutted some of the offensive line. The offensive line stinks. It's just, like I said, the best thing that happened to this Eagles organization and for you Eagles fans is the fact that Chip Kelly's dumbass is fucking gone. Period. So now what's next for this organization as they head into the offseason and head towards 2016? Well, first and foremost, now that they've went and hired their guy in Doug Pedersen to be their next head coach, they need to put a quality infrastructure around him within that organization. They need to figure out who's going to be the GM, who's going to be calling the shots when it comes to free agency, who's going to be calling the shots when it comes to player personnel, who's going to be calling the shots when it comes to the draft, all of those things. Doug Pedersen needs to have a good infrastructure around him. That's first and foremost. And the next thing they need to do, before they do anything else, is re-sign fucking Fletcher Cox. He's the best player on your team. Easily the best defensive player you have. You must re-sign him. The fact that he still hasn't been re-signed as of this recording is absolutely astounding to me. If anything, this should have been done either before the 2015 season even commenced or at some point in time during the 2015 season. but because incompetent dipshit Chip Kelly, the general manager, didn't know what the fuck he was doing and didn't understand clearly the name of the game in today's NFL salary cap environment, he decided, well, we'll just let Fletcher Cox kind of ride it out because I believe in my system that's won 0 playoff games at the NFL level more than I do this fucking Pro Bowl talent that could play in a 3-4 or a 4-3. Why the hell would I want to pay him big money? Those type of guys grow on trees. They grow on petrified wood, you dipshit. So they got to re-sign Fletcher Cox. That to me is the number one priority. Then you figure out everything else. But then they've got some important decisions to make. You've got Sam Bradford. Are you really going to continue to hitch your wagon to Sam Bradford? He failed in St. Louis. And let's face it, he failed in his 1 year in Philadelphia. And he was a Chip Kelly decision. Why would you, if you're a new coach, a new front office, want to hitch yourself to any personnel decision that Chip Kelly fucking made? Because so many of them were damn wrong. That's a big question. I mean, are they going to be able to upgrade that position elsewhere? Or are they going to be stuck with Bradford for another year or two because they gave up so much of draft picks? They got to at least bear it out and see what happens. You look at DeMarco Murray. He didn't do much this past year. He never really seemed comfortable. Are you going to sit there and continue to pay him big money? Or are you ready to move on from him? Big question. Jason Peters. Guy's been a good left tackle for the Eagles for a number of years. Is it time to move on from him, get rid of his cap figure, to move Lane Johnson over to the left side and figure out a way to address the right side after that? These are big questions. They're important questions for the Eagles. But I think in terms of the offseason, one thing they do have to be very focused on is accumulating some additional draft pick currency. Because, of course, Chip Kelly pissed away some valuable early draft picks the past 2 years with the ridiculousness that was the fucking Sam Bradford trade. Now you get into a situation where you've got a team in this draft picking 13th in the first round, but no second round pick. Yes, they've got their third rounders, what have you, but at the end of the day, they don't have that second round pick. This is a team that has a lot of holes on both sides of the ball. They need as much draft pick currency as they could possibly muster and as much as they could possibly get their hands on. As result, they need to sit there and try to figure out ways to accumulate some additional draft pick currency. For where the Eagles are sitting at number 13, unless the right quarterback is there for them, I really don't see one player or one area of need that is so significantly above everything else, or a player fit that makes so much ungodly sense to where they have to stay put at number 13. I look at the Eagles, they have to be exploring a trade back because that way you can explore trade back. Maybe you trade back a few picks and you get an additional third. Maybe you trade way back into the 20s and you're able to pick up a second and a fourth or a second and a third or maybe a second this year and a third next year, something along those lines. The Eagles need that draft pick currency because it's going to take some time to fix the mistakes and fix the problems created by Chip Kelly and his stupidity. And then once they get into the actual draft itself, they've got a draft for new and changing offensive and defensive systems. There's a chance that this team could switch to the 4-3 on defense. Obviously, that's going to require some tweaking in the Jimmies and Joes that you've got on the roster. Offensively, I highly doubt they're going to keep a lot of the principles that Chip Kelly had in place. So some of the guys they have may fit better in the new system. Some of the guys they have may not fit at all in the new system. So you got to find guys in this draft that will fit what you're trying to do both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. In terms of their biggest draft needs, I think number one, obviously quarterback. Need to remind you, they traded for Sam Bradford. Yes, quarterback is their fucking number one need. But then you got to look at it as well, just as big of a need damn near as the offensive line. I'd expect if Jason Peters isn't gone this year, he's going to be gone soon. So you're going to need young depth at offensive tackle. If they decide to move Lane Johnson over to the left side, then that just creates a hole at the right side. If they decide they want to keep Lane Johnson on the right side and they want to get rid of Jason Peters, then that means that they need a left tackle in a very, very bad way. And that might be a situation where they end up going into that 13th overall pick. If they stayed there, they might end up drafting an offensive tackle like a Jack Conklin or maybe a Taylor Decker because they feel that those guys could be at least serviceable at left tackle at the NFL level. If that right quarterback isn't there for them, I would see offensive tackle being a very distinct possibility for them. At some point in time in the draft, they need to improve their depth and talent in the middle of that offensive line. The guard position could most certainly be addressed, and it probably should be a position that's addressed at least twice throughout the 7 rounds of the 2016 NFL Draft. On defense, they need depth in the secondary, at corner, at safety. They might need some new defensive linemen to fit if they're going to be running a 4-3 going forward. I don't know if that's been formally confirmed or not, but if they are, again, the bottom line is is Chip Kelly set this organization back potentially years. And it's going to take quality coaching by Doug Pedersen and a quality infrastructure around him and a support system in place to make some of the right moves, do the right things, actually run this like a front office in the NFL should be run for this team to be really a factor again. If they do that, then they can be. They do have some pieces in place. They have some talent there. But, man, they've got a lot of flaws on their roster, too, and a lot of problems that I don't know if they can be fixed in just one off season.